Welcome back to our 30 frames per second console generation again. Let's look into this. Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. So in today's video I would like to talk about this generation of consoles and their performance. So last generation consoles were 30 frames per second for the most part, right? Most games would run at 30 frames per second. Yes, there were some titles running at 60, but there were not really a lot of them. So yeah, we knew what to expect of these consoles, and especially due to the very low power and low performance CPUs, right? Like nobody really expected much from these consoles when it comes to performance. Like locked 30 at 4K or 1440p was good enough. Now, before that generation started, or even shortly after this generation started, we all were super excited about the fact that finally these consoles shipped with pretty powerful CPUs. Yes, these are still mobile-like kind of CPUs, but they are very capable, right? Way more capable than last generation consoles CPUs, right? So we were all expecting, including myself and many others, that finally this is the generation where we will see 60 frames per second for the most part, right? Like, we were all celebrating no more 30 frames per second, only games on Xbox Series X and PlayStation 5. Obviously, we were totally fine, and I'm still totally fine with 30 frames per second performance modes, but just give me 60 frames per second mode too. And actually, a lot of games actually do that, but there's also some games that don't, or games that, yes, 30 frames per second mode is pretty stable, but when it comes to performance mode and running game at 60 frames per second, well, that's not an easy task, and we are actually getting a messy experience in this particular mode, performance mode. And obviously, good example would be Star Wars Jedi Survivor. Great game, apparently, great graphics with ray tracing on all the time, by the way. The problem is that yes, it's pretty stable at 30 frames per second in resolution mode, but it also drops frames here and there as well. Apparently, sometimes even down to 15 frames per second on PlayStation 5. I'm not sure if that's really the case on Xbox Series X. By the way, Digital Foundry did say that the performance issues are pretty much the same on both platforms. So like, yeah, just for console warriors, just wanted to say that both versions are very, very similar and comes with very similar issues, if you know what I mean. So hopefully these will be fixed. By the way, I did see like 2 hours ago a post from developers saying that they already released a patch for PC, and a patch for consoles is coming tomorrow, I think. So hey, some good news. Maybe performance will improve, but I don't think it will be locked 60 frames per second, actually, for one particular reason. And this is actually a great example. I'm talking about this particular game, Star Wars Jedi Survivor, because this is a great example of a game that developers decided to go with visual fidelity over performance, and in a way that it's not even about resolution and performance modes, it's more about like ray tracing, right? So developers decided to unify their game across the platforms, at least on consoles, or high-end consoles, and basically ray tracing is actually present in both performance and resolution modes on Xbox Series X and PlayStation 5. Now, Xbox Series S does not come with ray tracing, right? So, that was doable. They did that for Xbox Series S. And funny enough, Xbox Series S apparently is actually one of the more stable when it comes to 30 frames per second performance, because that game, even on PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X in 4K, 30 frames per second, obviously that's all reconstructed FSR2 4K, right? So it's not native resolutions. So developers decided to use FSR 2.0 for both resolution and performance mode. But yeah, I mean, even in that mode with FSR, so it's not really loaded, the GPU is not as heavily loaded, PlayStation 5 drops down to like 15, 17 frames per second at times. And, this is the thing with ray tracing. Xbox Series S does not support ray tracing, and it does not occur with these issues, right? So what I'm trying to say is that, unfortunately, this is yet another example where developers, have chosen to go with graphics visual fidelity over performance. Because, I'm not trying to say that if the ray tracing was disabled totally, or, at least some parts of it in a game, that the game would, all of a sudden started running at locked 60 frames per second, but performance would be much better anyway. And this is the thing that bugs me a little bit on consoles, and that has been the case for a while now, that developers actually do push these visual fidelity features on us gamers, but they don't give us options to not go with that. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm totally fine with ray tracing and all these super features as long as game runs at 60 frames per second or close. But performance mode or performance modes on both Xbox Series X and PlayStation 5, unfortunately drops sometimes down to even, like I said, 45, even below 40 frames per second. So that's not really a good experience. Obviously, that will depend on the level, on what's going on the screen and that kind of stuff, right? So at the end of the day, the performance is not great, mainly due to the fact that developers actually did push for graphics fidelity. And also, this goes to show that I don't think that moving forward, even with these proper next-gen game engines, I don't think these consoles are capable to run very, very demanding graphics games at 60 frames per second at any sort of reasonable resolution, in my opinion, right? Because like on PC, and I understand that Jedi Survivor is actually not a good port for PC, so so maybe this particular one is not a good example, but there's a ton of other games where on PC you can just disable this or that feature and your PC can cope. And going back to Jedi Survivor, I've seen some benchmarks in, for example, my RTX 3070. I've seen benchmarks of similar cards. RTX 3070 is pretty much capable of running Jedi Survivor at 1440p native, 60 frames per second, very close and hardly any drops, only here and there. And that's even with ray tracing. Obviously, without ray tracing, the performance, is a little bit better. And by the way, you have to, I think the best way to make sure that the changes have been applied, you have to actually restart the game. So that's not really great either. But hey, the options are there, and yeah, at 60 frames per second is is available on PC, even though that game still needs a lot of patches for PC too. And like I said, developers did release a PC patch for that game already. I haven't really tested it, but I'm sure that it's improving performance because they even said that in the notes. So guys, hey, it is what it is. Looking at your PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series S, you are looking at a 30 frames per second next generation game console pretty much, right? And We can argue, we can discuss why is that happening. Is that lack of features, lack of power? Well, maybe developers poorly optimizing for these games. It can be all that, but at the end of the day, hey, you are playing at 30 frames per second. This is not the first time that happened. Like looking at last couple of months, we had Gotham Knights, we had Plague's Tale, Requiem, we had now Redfall's coming locked to 30. Well, Jedi Survivor is pretty much a 30 frames per second game too, because it's really not playable at 60, and there's been some other games running only at 30 frames per second, and I think that will continue. Sadly. So I'm pretty actually happy that I do have a PC too, because I can choose where the game actually plays pretty well. I've got a decent PC, so I can even power through or like force through some of the issues, I guess. But yeah, I'm still waiting for patches to actually play that game, so I'll probably play this game I don't know, next week more maybe, we'll see. This game will probably be cheaper too. So anyway, that's the video. I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know in the comment section below what you think about it, and I will see you all in the next one. Take care.